The future of finance depends on leaders who can innovate and transform their organizations. Without forward-thinking leadership, the industry risks falling behind. In today's episode, we'll explore the leadership gap in the financial industry, why so many institutions are stuck in the present, and what it takes to lead effectively into the future.
You're listening to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
Welcome back to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast. I'm Audrey Cannata, operations lead here at the Digital Growth Institute. And joining me for today's conversation is founder and CEO, James Robert Lay.
Hey, Audrey.
Hello, James Robert.
It's good to hang out with you today and talk about a topic that is very important and one that I'm very passionate about, for sure.
Yes, you are, and so am I. And I think this is something that we're always talking about over here, leadership. And you've noticed recently just a little bit of a leadership gap in the industry. And I don't know if that's because you have been spending a little bit more time and you're involved in different coaching groups where you get to spend quite a bit of time with others outside of the industry. And maybe you're seeing things and now kind of comparing them to where we are. So where did this come from? Because this was your idea to have this conversation today.
It was, and it's definitely contextual to, I would say, some recent experiences that I have had. I am involved in different entrepreneurial coaching programs. I have invested heavily in myself since 2012, 2013 to continue to see things differently because I know how dangerous it can be when you get stuck in your own head, you get stuck in your own bias for that matter. That's where you fall quickly into the cave of complacency. And it's yes, I've been working and hanging out with other entrepreneurs and we've been comparing notes. So I have a very broad context for this conversation, but then also coming from the macro down into the micro, I have been facilitating a number of, we'll call them team alignment workshops, which are part of our Banking on Digital Growth program, specifically when it comes to helping financial brands develop a digital growth strategy. So looking at this from two different, we'll call them data points.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in just a second, but I want to take one moment to just share something good with us. What's been going on with you recently?
What is good? I would say within the last 7 days or so, last week, I hit 3 different cities for different workshops, and some of them were me facilitating. A couple of them were me attending and learning and growing. And for those that I was able to attend to learn and grow, I didn't go by myself this time. I was so grateful for Delina, my wife, being able to make the trip with me.
Yes.
And
Twice.
yes, twice, which, she's never done that before. And so to be able to learn and grow together with her, and these were entrepreneurial learning experiences, it was a fantastic way to invest time together for the future.
Yes. I was so excited for Delina to get to join you on these 2 trips. And if our listeners don't know, Delina kicks so much butt and works so hard behind the scenes in the Lay household. I mean, she is incredible. And I just was so happy to see her just take some time, get on a plane and just go and escape because she is nonstop working her tail off. And so I just love seeing that and her taking you up on or taking the opportunity.
Yes.
She didn't have to go. She could have said, no, I'm too busy. But she went not once, but twice.
She went twice. And the conversations that we have had coming out of that, thinking about just, our future as a couple, as a family, but also with the work that we're doing here, because not only is she busting her tail behind the scenes, being a mom, which and as you are too, and I always frame mom as an acronym. Like there are many acronyms in Digital Growthtopia. It's mom is the manager of madness. So there's that, but then she's very involved here,
Yeah.
working behind the scenes, in an advisory role. But then also she has stepped up at her father's company as well, to help to facilitate and manage operations over there. So there's a lot on her plate for sure.
Yep.
And to, like you said, for her to make that choice, make that commitment to go to learn, she came back seeing things differently as well.
Good. I am so glad. So let's get into today's conversation. And part of this comes from the learnings that you had on your three different trips recently, but it's the leadership gap
Mm,
that we're seeing, particularly in the financial industry. We talked to a lot of leaders, and it seems to be the overwhelming majority. The trend is their future, or they are focused on the present.
yeah.
I mean, there is no time to think about the future, and they're really just stuck grinding day to day and getting things done. Where's the disconnect here? Has it
Well,
always been this way? Has it changed? What's going on?
case in point, I have reached out to a couple of leaders within the past, really, I would say 2 weeks, check in, see how they're doing. Some of them had attended a workshop at the Financial Brand Forum earlier this year, and it was just a very simple question: how are you making progress? Since, what was it, May, I believe.
Hmm.
And there appears to be a theme of, we've been so busy, um, we haven't been able to do what we wanted to do, we are stuck in the day to day. And here's the thing: the story's not changing. It's the same story. It's a new year, it's a new month, it's a new quarter, but the story continues to be the same. And that's where I see this leadership gap, really. And perhaps it has been this way, but if I look back over the last 22 years working and guiding financial brands, the feeling of quote unquote falling behind has increased significantly since March of 2020. And we know the COVID experience. We know how much people grew, in fact, through the COVID experience to do things that they never thought were possible.
Right.
But there was a forcing function that forced people to change. And it's my take that if people are not forced to change, they're probably going to stay the same, stuck in the status quo, doing what they've always done, focused on the here and now, rather than thinking about the future. But the challenge is that the future, to quote Peter Diamandis in his book, the future is faster than you think, you know?
Yeah. I see like two different things here that come to mind. It's okay, is this just the way it is in the industry and we just never really noticed it or you never really noticed it as much before? And how much of this lack of leadership and future focused thinking is within, say, the leader's control? If you're VP of marketing, sales, how much of that is in your control or you're just reacting? So that's kind of one point.
Well, take that up
The
to
other point is,
take that up to the board level, though.
right.
Like, I think of someone who has been a guest on this podcast, and we had a private conversation. And one of the things that they shared with me was, well, listen, I can only control what I can control. I appreciated that perspective because
Right.
they were influencing. And I think that's the key element of leadership, is to influence the direction of yourself first and foremost, to influence the direction of the team that you're leading, and then
Yeah.
if you have the ability to influence the direction of the organization. But the danger is getting trapped in the cave of complacency and making decisions in the present based
Yeah.
upon past experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really does. I mean, it is a top down thing. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think you mentioned since 2020, since COVID.
Mm.
And a lot of the rapid changes. And I feel, and I know I can get this way sometimes just naturally. There's so much change going on, and there's like this overwhelming amount of like rushing and anxiety. And oh my gosh, we got to do this. Hurry, we got to do that. It's this scarcity mindset. It's a race. Oh my gosh. And so maybe there's a lot of that going on and not really thought out strategies, just doing things because you're looking around and everybody else is. And so I think that could be part of it. There's lacking that real intention and vision on why are we doing this? What is the purpose? Instead, it's just like everyone's just trying to play catch up with each other.
You use the word vision, and that is something that we cannot gloss over because vision is the key to leadership. Um, Vision is what provides a path towards the future. Vision, it comes from being able to see things from a different perspective. It's sight. Clarity comes into play here. And what I'm finding, you mentioned the point of we just don't have time to think. Let's roll this back even further. There are leaders, and we uncovered this when writing Banking on Change. There are leaders who feel, perceive, and it's perception. They feel that they don't have time to even learn. 70 to 80% of financial brand leaders are investing 1 to 2 hours a week or less. And it's really the or less, it's around 50% are not investing really any time at all into their ongoing learning, growth, development. No wonder the industry stays the same. No wonder nothing changes, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. All change that leads to future growth, it starts within, it starts with the individual. And if the individual is not changing, nothing's going to change. And here we are, we're going to be here 10 years later, and we're going to be in the exact same place, having the same exact conversations, talking about the same exact things. And I've seen this. I've seen,
Yeah.
take 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 credit unions for example, right? Like, and I've got 2+ decades of perspective on this. Why the hell are we talking about credit unions, talking about the credit union difference, and talking about, well, what's the difference between credit unions and banks? We've been talking about the same shit for 2 years, or not 2 years,
Yeah.
20 years.
I was
Like,
going to say, I personally had those conversations 14 years ago.
and it and does it I know you did. And when you came back to the industry, and that's the thing, you left and you came
Yeah.
back and you're like, are we still talking about this? And
Right.
and does it really matter?
Yeah.
Because what matters is not what our opinion is. Does it matter? Doesn't it matter what our feelings are about this? What matters is what's going on in the quote unquote the real world, in the marketplace. And
Yeah.
if you think about change in the marketplace level, at the macro level, changes in technology have transformed changes and led to changes in the competitive landscape, which has led to changes in consumer behavior. But are we seeing
So
that?
much.
But are we seeing that?
Yeah.
So much what? And you're going to go somewhere with that.
I mean, there's just so much at play here. I mean, I'm so many things to say and touch on. I think a lot of it's culture. So much, and I know, oh, culture, that kind of gets annoying to talk about. I get it. But really and truly, when you built that into the culture, say the learning, for example, the future focused thinking, the problem is how do you change the culture
Mm.
at an organization that's been the same for decades and decades and decades, passed down? It's like there's no change at that point. You're going in there. You know what I'm saying?
I
Like,
know exactly what you're saying, and maybe this is where what I'm about to say, it it can feel very pessimistic and very negative, but it is not meant to be that way. And what I mean by that is all transformation that leads to future growth starts by telling the truth.
there you go. Tell us the truth, James Robert.
The truth is, A, if nothing changes, nothing changes. B, and this is more of a question, what if the system is designed to protect the system. What if the system within the culture of a financial brand is designed to protect the system, and any time that change is introduced, the system views that as a threat.
That that's it.
So, like an antivirus in a computer, it's going to say, there's a new idea. Let's shut that down. That's going to be dangerous. When in reality, it could be the saving grace for the future of the organization. Because once again, let's be honest. 20 years ago, more or less, we had about 15,000 credit unions. 20 years ago, we had about 15,000 community banks.
That's the thing. It's not hurting enough. That's not hurting enough. That's a large reason why everyone or these organizations are still operating the exact same way they've been operating for decades and decades and decades. They either don't feel the pain, they don't see it, they're in denial, they don't believe it. Maybe they're just trying to get through, the next decade of their career and let the people after them figure it out. I don't know.
Denial for sure. Not wanting to accept the present reality, not having perspective, not understanding of all of the transformations that have transpired over the last 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And that was the whole premise of me writing Banking on Change to begin with in the first place. But
Yep.
I wrote Banking on Change and I'm questioning, it's like, did I write it out to the void? Because, you know, did is this an industry that just really doesn't want to change?
Yep.
And if that's the case, what does that future look like? Because the world is going to continue to change. People are going to continue to change. Um, and and once again, the system's designed to protect the system. And so that's where leadership comes back into play. Because leadership is about leading, guiding towards the future, or reframe this. Leadership is about bringing the future into the present moment. Leadership is about
Exactly.
having a vision of the future and bringing that future into the present moment. Leadership is about operating from a future state, not from a present day state. If you're operating from a present day state, that's management.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was about to say, maybe not everyone's a leader then. Let's talk about the difference. What makes you a leader? What makes you a manager? Maybe there's more managers in the industry than true leaders.
Leaders bring the future into the present. They go out, they see something different because they have perspective, and they're able to communicate that back internally. Managers help to bring that vision to life. One is not better than the other, but if you have an over index of
Right.
managers compared to leaders, you're going to have people who are fighting for the status quo as opposed to challenging the status quo.
Exactly.
And that's dangerous for the growth
Yeah.
of an organization in times of exponential change, such as we have been in since March of 2020 and will continue to be in for the foreseeable future. That it is the lack of perspective, it is the lack of sight. And when
Yep.
there's a lack of perspective and a lack of sight, there's a lack of leadership. And it asked the question, maybe it doesn't hurt enough.
Right.
Because I'm looking at this from an entrepreneurial lens.
Yeah.
And I'm one who's going to challenge my own bias or surround myself with people who ask me very hard questions. Because if I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago, I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm not the same person I was a week ago. I'm not even the same person I was yesterday. There's and if I compare today to yesterday, small little nuances, 1% changes. But it's when we go up to the macro level, it's like I can look back and be like, you know what? I am definitely not the same person I was a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But if you're so busy focusing on the here and the now and the doing, you failed to stop, pause, to review, to reflect, you're not going to get that perspective.
Yeah. And this is a great example. And I'll use you and I, um, our differences and our working relationship. You are 100% a better leader than I am because you are a visionary. A lot of that is your innovative mind. That's your entrepreneurial spirit. I would say that I probably, you tell me, I don't know, probably more on the better manager side of things because I do the operations, the day to day, as we like to say, I get shit done. And you're right. We need both of us together. Like you've got to have the vision. So you got to drive that ship, or point us in the direction and I'll help you drive it. But one of the things that we've been doing right now, like in real time, is we're doing a ton of future focused thinking. And James Robert, you have been very much, I mean, you are sticking to 20% of your week or your day, however you want to break it down. 20% of your doing is future focused, and you are sticking to that. And I will tell you, me, who leads more on the manager side of things, that's hard for me. I'm not going to lie. It is hard for me to sit down and think about 6 months from now or 3 months from now or 1 month from now when I have things on my to-do
Mm.
list today. And I get that. And I completely empathize with that. And which is why I appreciate you leading the way and setting that time aside, blocking that time aside so that we do sit down and shut down everything. And you've given me permission, Audrey, that can wait. And I've always kind of struggled with that. Like I think everything has to be done right now. And you've been really great about pushing back and saying, nope, that can wait. Now is the time to focus on the future, and it's worked great. But you are doing that, and you're really having to um uh be prioritize that in your schedule, and you're really sticking to it.
I want to roll back the idea of leader versus manager. You're 100% correct. I am like the world's worst manager. Period. Won't even argue against that. Um and I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Like, and I think that's another point of leadership. You got to know yourself.
Yeah,
You got to know who, and once again, you could be a manager, but you could be a leader. What I
sure.
mean by that is you could be and for example, you're leading a team,
Yeah,
but your focus is more of making things happen
yeah,
in the present. But you're still a leader operating, leading people
yeah,
because you're leading yourself. And if I think about the leadership, the development that you've done first and foremost for yourself. I mean, over the last really 18 months, I'm not even
yeah.
going to go back to when you came in, like really just the last 12 to 18 months. That's been a huge transformation because you're like, I'm going to lead myself. But what is leading you to lead yourself is you are operating from a future state. You have a vision for yourself, both personally as well as professionally. And that vision for the future is bigger than where it is today, which comes back and begs the question when it comes to financial brand leaders, do they have a bigger vision? Do they have a bigger future for themselves?
But we talk about that, and I would say one of the things that we do constantly, we set our 90-day goals and we revisit them and we hold ourselves, like you hold me accountable. So it's not that I have a vision, but I have a vision that's we're constantly thinking about, talking about,
Coming back to,
working backwards to figure out how we can get there. So I think there's a lot of us who, and I probably in the past been guilty of this, like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that one day, or oh, down the
That's
line.
bullshit.
Um,
I
but
can't operate like that. For me
it's
personally,
lofty. Yeah,
and
it's vague, it's lofty.
and I can't, and I don't want to be around people who operate like that. I want to be around people who are wanting to create something bigger for themselves. And the way that they're going to create something bigger for themselves is they're going to create something bigger for those who are around them, those that they are helping. It's a rising tide lifts all ships. That's why I continuously am asking you. It's like, where do you want to go? Almost like, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And I think that's a great question. Who do you want to be? Because who you're today doesn't mean who you're going to have to be a year from now, 12 years from now. I mean, think about where you're at today. If I was to ask you 10 years ago, Audrey, who do you want to be when you quote unquote grow up? Because you were in the middle of teaching at that
Yep.
point. You were not involved in the level of fitness that you are today.
Mm.
Your future self
Wasn't even
back
a
then
parent yet.
did not exist in your mind, I don't think.
Yeah. No, it didn't. It didn't. I don't know that I ever thought that far ahead, to be honest with you. I mean, I will say as a teacher, there were a few times where I thought to myself, "Hey, 30 years of doing this? Wow.
So
I don't know. I don't know about all that,
how many
but I just want
people
to get through this school year."
how many people feel the same exact way right now watching or listening to this conversation?
But you know what? I think I did. I started asking myself that. And that's what made the change. Because I think the beginning, I spent 6 years, jumped into teaching, no experience. And man, this first few years, I was learning just so quickly. I mean, I was consuming knowledge, and that was so exciting. Then year 6, 7 come around, and I'm doing great. I'm in cruise control. And after 2 years of that, I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is all going to be the same. Now that I've got it and I figured it out, and I'm starting to see things differently. And then I realize, do I want to keep doing this? Is this where I want to be? I don't see
Is
a lot changing.
is it part of the human condition to need to always be striving for something more? And the moment
It
that
should be.
it's a question because I don't I probably have more questions than I have answers, but
Yeah.
is it part of the human condition to want to be striving for something more, to go climb the next mountain, to do the next big thing? And when we stop doing that, we start dying inside. And
Yeah.
we just kind of sit back. And you know what Napoleon Hill, because I know we both read Napoleon Hill, and
Yeah.
specifically Outwitting the Devil,
Yep.
he called those people drifters.
Drifters. I think that's why that's why there could be a lot of fear of success. I know I felt this. I've actually expressed this to you recently. I don't know, in the last month or two, about a personal goal of mine that I had, a personal financial goal. And I said, what am I going to do when I reach that? Like that to me, the goal I have seems so big and grand and massive. And it's like, okay, when I get there, how am I going to feel? Is it going to be like, well, now it's over. Journey's over. Here I am.
And what did I
And you're
tell
like,
you
no,
though?
Audrey, that's not
I
going to
push
happen.
back and I challenge on you because I think the best analogy for that is like you're climbing up towards this mountain, and I know that you recently read Peaks and Valley.
Mhm.
Great book, by the way. You're climbing up that mountain to achieve that goal that you've set out for yourself. Your fear was, well, what happens when I achieve that goal? And they address that in Peaks and Valleys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is why it's important to surround yourself with people who are always looking to climb, to seek, to
Yep.
explore, to learn. It's also one of the reasons why I've been thinking about how can we create value in this industry? Because the work that we do, it requires change. From
Yes.
from secret shopping a website, that requires change. Because when you secret shop a website, the website optimization game plan, it provides findings. So a different perspective to help see things differently. That's fantastic. That's step number one in the 4 steps of human transformation is to see things differently. And when you start to see things differently, it gets you thinking. It's like, well, if we have these gaps, if we have these blind spots within just our website when it comes to a particular product line, where else might there be blind spots that we can't see? And that gets into the second step, which is to help an organization get a digital growth strategy so that they can close those gaps, close those blind spots. And you know so well, and this came up in a conversation that I was having yesterday with a leader who I've worked with for probably 12 years at this point. When you see different and you think different, what's the next step? So, I mean, if you're watching and listening, I want you to just ponder for a moment. Maybe you're seeing things differently from the conversation that Audrey and I are having right now. Maybe you're seeing things differently from a conference that you recently attended, an article that you read, which is why ongoing learning and development is so key to continuous growth. It's the only way to see different. So you're going to see different. And I'm willing to bet you're probably thinking differently. What's the third step? And if you're like, and Audrey has seen this, 98, 99% of people, you might be thinking, well, I'm going to do different. I'm going to be different. I'm going to act different. And you're not. And that's where we're at as an industry right now. There's a lot of knowledge. You
Yep.
have the answers. You're just failing to take action. And there's one reason why. You want to hit that, Audrey? You want to address that? Why? What bridges the gap between thought and action?
Feeling.
You got to feel different.
I think the lack of ongoing learning and education is a bigger issue than we probably think it is. If you're thinking of 4 steps, see, think, feel, do, it takes so many times to see something before you think differently, like exposure to a new idea. You've got to see it repeatedly before you start thinking. Then you've got to sit and think about it. I mean, that feeling piece, it might take a while. For me, you've seen it. There's been a lot of times where that step 3, that feeling has taken me months to get to, and then you don't know what's going to trigger that, and then all of a sudden the light goes off, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I got it now. But if we don't take the time to read and to think and to learn constantly, you're not going to get to the feeling part to then the doing part.
It it triggers a negative emotion in me
Yes.
whenever I hear someone say, "Ah, I don't have time to learn. I don't have time to read. I don't have time for this."
That does not sound cool, by the way. I know that, I'm busy. We hear that a lot. I'm sorry. It's not the cool thing to say anymore.
If it's important,
Too busy.
and I think that's the thing. If it's important, you'll make the time.
Yeah.
It's why you're not working out and going to F45 and sweating and putting your body in an uncomfortable state to get some present day gain. Your gains have been gained over years of doing this.
Yeah. Right.
So to think that you're going to get an instant payback or payoff from learning
I
it, and I want to loop back to something you said, because once again, I think this was so important, and I appreciate the perspective. You're coming at this from an educator, because I believe once an educator, always an educator. You're a teacher. It sometimes takes more than once to see something.
More often than not. Especially for those my Colby friends out there who are similar to me and the bankers out there.
Mm.
We've got to get exposed multiple times, and many times multiple different ways to start thinking enough about it to where we have a change of heart, a change of feeling, a change of motivation. And I'm not saying it couldn't happen quickly. It very well might. But I think more often than not, it takes time. But we don't give ourselves that time. James Robert, I have probably half a dozen books on personal growth and the analogy of the mountain, peaks and valleys, the mountain is you. I mean, there's tons on this subject. And it's taken me like multiple reads to get something different out of it each time.
Mm.
You know, you just gave me peaks and valleys to read. And I'm not going to lie, when I first got it, I thought, I wonder what I'm going to get out of this. I feel like I've kind of done that analogy and thought about it a lot. Like I'm not sure if I'm going to get anything out of it. Guess what? Of course, I was completely wrong because I saw something that I hadn't seen before in the other books that I've read who use that similar mountain analogy and something big too. Like it was a key takeaway for me that it really hit me hard,
What'd you take from
but I
that?
gave that time.
What'd you take from that?
What I took from that is how often don't let what was the quote? Wish I had it. When you're on the mountain, don't get complacent, don't get arrogant, don't let your ego take over
Mm.
when you're at that high, when you're at that peak. Those decisions you make when you're on the top of the mountain determine how long you stay there or whether or not you get kicked back down into the valley. And I feel for me, when I reach a goal or I get somewhere where I have been working towards and I've achieved it, there's a little bit of that deflation or, okay, my work here's done. I've got this. And then we don't keep up with it or we get arrogant. We act like we're better than somebody because of it. All of those things are going to lead you back down the mountain. And that to me was a big light bulb because I feel like I'm in a great point right now in my life.
Mm. But you got to be mindful
Yes.
because there's a bigger mountain to climb. And what's going to get you to that mountain is it going to be what got you to the mountain that you're on right now. And to get to the next mountain, there's a very high probability you're going to have to go through a valley along the
Yeah.
way.
A different valley.
Exactly. But
Constant.
that's the journey. That's the journey of continuous growth. To see different, to think different, most importantly, to feel different, because it's the feeling that inspires the the doing, the action, the being. It's the feeling that provides the motivation, but that's where feeling can be also very dangerous because feeling, when you think about inspiration, inspiration is like a light or a candle. It will dim and it'll burn
Mhm.
out. Motivation's like a
Absolutely.
muscle, it will tire. And that's why when we are making these climbs, particularly as a leader, you got to surround yourself with other people who are taking the climb together with you.
100%. I mean, I cannot stress that enough. Where I'm at today, the growth I've achieved is because of the people I've surrounded myself with or the people I've distanced myself from
Mm,
has made all the difference.
mm.
James Robert, this has been such a good conversation, passionate conversation for sure, but I think an important conversation to have individually, thinking about your team, your organization, personally. I mean, so much of this conversation does go right back to the individual, the self, who you are as a person outside of your role at your organization.
Yeah. I would say as
Final takeaway, final thoughts.
I'd say as we wrap up, I always want to send someone off with something that they can do right now and two questions to ask yourself. Are you are you operating in the present based upon your past experiences? Right, wrong, good, bad, doesn't matter. But are you operating based upon past experience, past perspective? Now flip it around. What would your future look like? What could your future look like as an individual, as a leader, for your team, for your organization, if you operated from, we'll say, the future self. Just do this for yourself. Don't even do this for your team. Don't even do this for your organization. What would your life look like if you were to operate from your future self a year from now, 3 years from now, a decade from now? I'm willing to bet it's probably far bigger than where you're at today. You just got to give yourself some time. You just got to give yourself some space to review where you've been to gain that perspective. But then, most importantly, learn and think about the possibility of what that bigger future could look like for yourself.
It's never too late. The mountain is never too tall to get started.
I agree. I agree.
We've both been there and will continue to be there.
You know what? And just for fun, if you made it this far in the podcast, um, we'll be sharing very shortly about a new mountain that we're about to climb here. And we
Mm,
want to climb with you and your organization because I'm seeing things differently.
yep.
And I want to share that. And I want to continue to grow, to climb with you, Audrey, and to continue to climb with those within financial brands who are committed to continuous learning, to continuous growth. And that growth will be experienced and realized by helping others do the same.
Thank you, James Robert.
Thank you, Audrey. This has been a lot of fun.